Millions of people are raised with the conviction that they entered this world already in debt, carrying a stain of guilt inherited from the first humans. But tracking the divergent paths of faiths sharing the story of Adam and Eve, this Western concept of innate guilt is a historical anomaly. Judaism, the root of the story, holds that humans are born with a balance of impulses, a drive for good and a drive for self-preservation. In this tradition, the choice in Eden was a personal mistake by two individuals, not a biological curse passed down to their descendants. In Islam, every child is born with fitra, a pure, uncorrupted nature. The Quran reports that after their lapse in the garden, Adam and Eve were immediately forgiven by God. The slate was wiped clean, leaving no shadow of inherited guilt to haunt future generations. Even the Eastern Orthodox branch of Christianity views the fallout of Eden as a spiritual disease rather than a legal conviction. They teach we inherited physical suffering from our ancestors, but we did not inherit their guilt. This leaves Western Christianity standing alone with its uniquely dark view of human nature. It forces us to ask why the West, and only the West, decided every infant arrives as a sinner needing a courtroom defense. The turning point arrived in the year 410 AD. For the first time in 8 centuries, the city of Rome was sacked. The Visigoths shattered the capital, ending an era of security that citizens believed was eternal. As the physical world turned into a landscape of fire and rubble, the citizens of the empire faced a crisis of meaning. If God was truly a protector, the ruins surrounding them required a massive theological explanation. Augustine of Hippo watched his civilization burn from across the Mediterranean. He wasn't crafting a cold academic theory. He was a desperate pastor trying to keep his people from abandoning faith in a literal apocalypse. Augustine's response was a form of theological martial law. He provided an answer for Rome's suffering by shifting the blame away from a failing God and onto a terminally broken humanity. This entire survival strategy hinged on Augustine's reading of a single verse, Romans 5:12. The original Greek used the phrase ho, which translates to because. The verse observed that death spread to all people because each person made their own choices and mistakes. Augustine relied on the Latin in quo, in whom. This shifted the meaning to state all humanity sinned inside Adam's original act. An observation of human failure was codified as a biological verdict. Western theology moved from individual choice to inherited ontological guilt. This linguistic pivot allowed Augustine to explain the fires of Rome. The empire wasn't a victim of a weak god. It was a guilty world finally experiencing the weight of its own ancient, shared corruption. Declaring everyone inherently depraved provided a strange form of stability. It leveled a fractured society. If every person was equally broken, then the emperor and the commoner were united in their shared need for something beyond this world. It successfully redirected the hopes of a dying empire. Since the physical Roman world was viewed as a lost cause, citizens began looking for a kingdom that was internal and eternal, rather than external and temporary. Dr. Reo Kim calls this a fear operating system, a logical framework for a world near extinction. Processing chaos through shared guilt created a closed-loop system pointing toward one outcome, the need for inward grace. For centuries, it offered a secure psychological refuge. Long after the Roman crisis passed and European civilization stabilized, the Church continued to run Augustine's emergency code. But as the centuries wore on, the original pastoral intent began to fade into a cold, rigid legalism. Medieval thinkers like Anselm and Calvin translated this survival mechanism into a courtroom schematic. They replaced the need for healing with the language of infinite debt and divine wrath, turning a desperate plea for grace into a set of punishing legal requirements. This framework provided a stable order for the feudal world, but it eventually collided with the modern age. As the Enlightenment and scientific progress changed how we understand justice and biology, the rigid logic of a cosmic courtroom began to chafe against our lived reality, sparking a slow, massive exit from the pews. To find a way forward, we have to look past the medieval legalism and the Roman emergency code. It is time to upgrade the operating system to something that matches the original intent of the story. Dr. Kim's Eden theology reaches back past the 5th century to an even older tradition,
the 2nd century growth theology of Irenaeus. This perspective presents Eden as a workshop rather than a static paradise. It was designed from the beginning as a training ground for human evolution, where we were created as unfinished seeds with the potential to grow into something far greater. The tree at the center was a necessary challenge required to exercise free will. This creates what Dr. Kim calls white pain, the creative friction of choosing spiritual growth over our own impulses, allowing the soul to slowly mature. This shifts our identity from defendants in a cosmic courtroom to fragments of the divine, destined to grow into a more mature likeness through the choices we make every day. By shedding the Roman emergency code of guilt, we can finally embrace a love operating system. Here, the spiritual life isn't about avoiding a sentence, it's about participating in a divine growth that has been the plan for humanity since the very beginning.